Hello and welcome, Esteban here. Welcome to the channel. Today I have a video from Pearl at Just Pearly Things. She has been called an anti-feminist. She's also been called the female Andrew Tate. She's interviewed thousands of women, modern women, we'll say. And what she's doing here is she's explaining her view, the difference between a traditional woman and a modern woman. So let's see what she has to say, and let's get into it.
So as you guys know, I was a normal woman selling copiers in Milwaukee when I was sent a Kevin Samuels video. This video led me into an online world of red pill content, PUAs, and dating and relationship content. This content led me to test out some of these ideas by interviewing 1,000 women. There were lessons in the process, but today I want to talk about the curse of the modern mother. For the sake of this show, I am going to need to define traditional and modern. There is a spectrum between traditional and modern. It's not black and white, but for all intents and purposes, traditional mothers are mothers that put the family over themselves. A modern mother is one that puts herself before the family. So oftentimes, guys, I will say, and a lot of people get offended by this, but traditional women are married before 25.
Okay. Now, at the beginning, she said she watched a Kevin Samuels video. Kevin Samuels was a guy that he was an image consultant, and he had a call-in show, and women would call in, and yeah, you should watch some of his content. It's actually kind of funny. But what he was doing was he was just checking women, just letting them know that, that if they want the man that they want, they're going about it the completely wrong way. So that sent her on a journey, right? And like she said, she's interviewed thousands of women, so she has a pretty good perspective. I guess you could call it anecdotal, but I mean, she has a lot of experience. But like she's breaking down the traditional woman. Puts certain things first, and like I look around and I don't see a lot of women putting forth effort to be a good wife, a good mother, a good helpmate to a man, to her husband. But it seems like everything in this society is going against that. It's teaching women to not be feminine, to develop masculine traits, like working hard and going out there and doing traditionally male roles. But like I completely. I know she's going to try to be a little bit on the fence about this, but traditional to me is always going to be better.
The reason I say that is because traditional women spend their youth on their family. That's the most important thing to them.
Yes.
Where modern women tend to spend their youth on themselves and then start a family later. One is not better or worse. They're just different.
Okay, they are different, but a major thing that people talk about or don't talk about is women who want a family usually start sooner, and for the sole fact that it's just easier to have babies when you're younger, in your 20s preferably, I would say. When you get to about 30, 32, 33 is when everything starts getting more difficult for a woman to get pregnant, more difficult, in other areas. But that's going to be the problem. And I think that a lot of women, aren't even told this. They think that they can go to school for 4 to 5 years, get a career, put marriage on the back burner, maybe get married in their late 20s, early 30s, and now they're off having kids, and the clock is ticking and it's almost up.
Another thing that I tend to say is traditional women believe in obeying their husbands, where modern women tend to want more of a 50-50 partnership, and they will say things like you need to negotiate with your husband. A traditional woman says whatever he says goes. One is not better or worse, I just have to define them. If more women were brutally honest with themselves, we would figure out that most women are not meant to be mothers, because being a mother is selfless, meaning you have to think about your husband and children before yourself. But we live in a world where women are told and enabled to put themselves first for a lifetime. Do you have a child and a lucrative career? State-sponsored daycare. Why raise your kids when someone else can? Why cook your husband dinner when Uber Eats is an option? Why clean the house when you can leave it messy or hire maids?
Well, to the answer to that is, practice what you preach, I guess. If you want to raise decent human beings, I guess you'd have to be a decent human being yourself. I mean, and that's the bar being really low. If you want, as a father, I want boys that are gonna work hard, be responsible, do things. So then I must work hard. I must be responsible. Because just talking to someone and just telling them, hey, this is what you need to do, is not going to download that into them. You also have to be it, so then they can see it and then they can emulate that. So now let's put it to the mother, right? The mother has daughters. Most of these girls that are growing up nowadays, they are emulating what they're seeing out of their mothers, meaning that's why we're getting all these modern women, is because their mothers are emulating that. They're telling them, hey, you don't need a man. You can go out there, make your own money, be independent, and everything's going to be just fine. And that is the furthest from the truth.
Neither is better or worse per se, but one thinks about the husband and children first, and one thinks about herself first. It blew my mind how many women I had met that were married to high-earning men and still believed they needed to work. They were lying to themselves. Sure, I understand that there's a recession, but you can move to a smaller house and spend more time with their children. But the money and the lifestyle was more important than the kids.
That's a very good point. Like she says, the man, I mean, everyone likes to fantasize that they're going to find a man that makes a bunch of money and they're going to, that's just not always the case. You're going to have to sacrifice something. Two people can go to work, and then, like she said, you're going to have daycare, you're going to have other things. The best way to do it is to have the mother at home with the children, right? Then you don't have to take them to daycare. Now, then you say, well, how much money does someone have to make for that? Well, that's where the sacrifice comes in. If the man isn't able to make as much money, so you can have all the things and go on the vacations and go out to dinner and do all these things, well, then you have to make a decision and say, well, we have to downsize. We have to live in a smaller home. We have to, we can't have this, we can't have that, because we want to sacrifice so our children can see and learn about traditional ways. But it seems like nowadays, well, we got to be like this, we got to be like that, we got to keep up with each other. So what has to happen? Well, mom has to go to work, dad has to go to work, the children are sent off to some school, propagandized by the school. They turn on their parents. I mean, you guys are seeing it happen all over the place, and it's because of values. It's because, we have given up our own birthrights for materialism.
Gen Z women rank men as seventh in their list of priorities. They put things like travel, work, and education above men.
Jesus.
But how did society get here, where marriage is falling apart and the sexes are more and more divided. When interviewing women, I break down the women in a couple categories by age group. The 70 to 90-year-old women were the beginning of the end of the generation of traditional women. Women in their 70s lived through a lot of the decline of society and were part of it, but I would still say that half are fairly traditional, meaning that when I ask them questions about obeying their husbands and things that show how they felt about traditional dynamics, they at the very least gave me traditional answers. The issues these women have is that even the traditional ones told their daughters not to be traditional. Being that I was in London, I interviewed a lot of women from traditional countries who shared with me that their mothers told them to get an education and not spend their youth on a family. 50 to 70-year-old women on a balance of probabilities were the first generation of truly shitty wives. This is where I see the femininity leave the culture. These women will swear tooth and nail that they are different than the young women today, but I saw little difference in their answers. They were the first generation of women who divorced their husbands and broke up their family.
See, this is a thing that I've noticed, and I've wondered about, is how come that disconnect? You know, you would think that older women, traditional mothers that had children, that had intact families, saw the benefits of those things and would pass down those values to their daughters. But what she's saying here is that, from what I can gather, is that there's a segment of these women that are saying, well, no, I'm no modern woman, you know, but what they're telling their daughters is that, you know, well, you know, your father, you know, the woman runs the house, your father's here, but, you know, he's not really the head of this thing, and the woman or the mother is responsible for all these things that are happening. And so once she takes control or takes charge, the masculinity is taken out and the femininity is put in, meaning that instead of it being traditional, it's more about you. It's more about what you want, you know, and what you think is good. But as you can tell, telling little girls or telling women that they don't need a man, they don't need to start a family when they're younger, you know, all these things are detrimental. They're not helping.
Every generation pretty much gets worse until we hit millennial women who are so bad that we don't even make it down the aisle.
Wow.
Each generation has offered less and less traditional skills, so it's no wonder we have less and less traditional outcomes. Again, I am not saying one is better or worse. Maybe Oprah's husband is happy. They have cooks, so who needs a housewife? What I am saying, it is different than before, and the sexes are more and more divided. I have a lot of empathy for the women I interviewed on some level. I found that probably more than half of women, I would guess 80%, have been alienated from their father in some way. They have been told from a young age that if they submit to a man, he will abuse them. So many mothers instilled fear in their daughters, even women that had been married 30 plus years. Stay-at-home wives would frame the father of their children as deadbeats, as if they worked a lot, and even calling themselves single mothers. Traditional marriages, the wives would complain to the kids and call their husbands toxic. Young women would say some off-the-cuff negative trait about their father, and when I would ask them to name specifics, they never could. It was really clear that the mother was telling them these things. I came to the realization that almost 90% of daddy issues were actually mommy issues.
Okay, that's really interesting right there, what she's saying. And I agree that most of these issues come from the lack of a father being there, the lack of the male influence, you know. So but what she's talking about, and I'd like a lot of women who hear this to ask themselves, do you see this? Do you do these things? because a man is working, are you telling the kids, he works too much, he's never around, instead of instilling something in the kids where they admire their father for working so hard, and giving them the things that working hard and what he provides for them. What she's talking about here is that, and we can play the blame game, and say it's men's fault or women's fault, but I believe, the lack of fathers, the lack of men, the lack of strong men, and the abundance of these weak men produces this culture where women are running families, and women running families is not working out. It just isn't.
They were mothers that could not regulate their emotions and used their children as emotional tampons.
Oh my God.
I saw this consistently across race, culture, and religion. Mothers hate the fathers of their children so much that they make the children pay for it. I saw this on both sides of my work, from interviewing men who were victims of divorce rape to interviewing women who were victims of parental alienation. Some women figure it out when they're older, some never will. So it's no wonder that the family is breaking down the way it is. Mothers teach their daughters to hate their fathers, and the cycle continues. A couple stories from this period that stuck with me. There was one man whose wife said that he had raped her the first time they hooked up.
Hold on. So she just said women hate their fathers or hate their husbands and teach the girls, their daughters, to hate their fathers. And that's really deep. It says in the Bible that how can you love your, how does it go? How can you love your heavenly Father which you do not see, yet hate your earthly father who you do see? And and I honestly believe that that's the reason that we have so many lost people, because of this unforgiveness of fathers. There's some of us have our fathers, some of us lost our fathers, some of us never had a father. But I think that's they call it daddy issues, they call it all kinds of things, but I think that's the crux of the whole issue in society. It's the lack of a father, it's the lack of masculinity, it's the lack of authority, and when you take that out of society as a whole, or all the way down to your family, it's very detrimental, and it causes so many problems that it's very difficult to even talk about because of how emotional it is for everyone. And I'm not trying to trigger anyone, but I do believe that these discussions need to happen, and people need to understand how relationships work, and how women are treating men, how men are treating women, and how it's affecting the kids. And and it just doesn't stop. It goes down the line. So I'm going to stop it there. Thank you for listening. Let me know what you think in the comments. Appreciate it. Talk to you soon.